Hi, welcome to this Facebook Live. My name is Dr. David Purvis. I'm a psychologist, and I'm talking tonight about how to trick your brain into stopping anxiety. So I'm just going to talk a little bit whilst, oh, hi, Alan. I'm just going to talk a little bit while people join in so they don't miss anything. Last night, hi, Amy. And the last couple of nights, actually, I've sprung it on a little bit, they said, and they tuned in time for me to say good night, which kind of defeats the object of the exercise. Hi, Kirsty, Angelica. Hi. So just to recap a little bit about what we talked about last night, and we're in a kind of a sequence in a sense, and I'm talking about, hi, Melanie, the neuroscience behind anxiety. Now, if you struggle with anxiety, you are probably not necessarily very informed about why you have anxiety. So last night I went through a little argument which explains, in a sense, the neuroscience of it. Hi, Gillian. Hi, Albert. So we established last night that your brain is, hi, Jenny. Hi there. Your brain lives in a black container. There's no light. Hi, Senga. And it's devoid of any kind of stimulus of its own, in a sense. Information only comes into your brain. Hi, Louise. Hi, Dave. Information only comes into your brain through your senses. So that is the only way that your brain gets information. And all information that comes into the brain is encoded. Photons of light, sound waves, molecules of taste, molecules of smell, and touch receptors that respond to change. Hi, Mary. Hi, Jennifer. Sorry. All right. Okay. So really, because your brain and your whole body, in a sense, are bombarded with a universe of information all of the time. Hi, Mary. Your brain really struggles. Well, it doesn't struggle. It's devised a system by which it filters out information which is not relevant. Okay, so that's basically where we're at right now. Your brain filters out information. Now, your brain is not a passive receiver of information, no, because your brain also creates experiences. So I told you last night that my father suffered from Charles Bonnet syndrome, and basically he imagined, as he was blind, he imagined that he saw little people. He called them the little people, little ginger-haired people in khaki. So you might 3 or 4 of them just like playing around, not doing anything much, but just sort of like messing around. And that was, I think, that was an hallucination, a visual hallucination. And I also told you about Anton syndrome, where people who are actually blind, rendered blind because of a stroke, think they can see. And so if you were to say to someone who was who had Anton syndrome, how many fingers am I holding up? They might say 4, and they see 4 fingers. So they actually see 4 fingers, and you're not holding up any fingers. So they're blind, but they believe that they can see. It's only after a little bit of experience with the external world where things start to go, okay, hang on, what's going wrong? What's going wrong? Now, I remember my dad, when he was getting really old, he died at 99 3/4, and so he was struggling with dementia a little bit towards the end. He came up with the idea that his carers were stealing his spoons. Now, the reason he did that was because he couldn't find his spoons because he was blind. But he interpreted that, in some way that made sense for him. So he thought that his carers were taking his spoons. Now, I promise you they weren't, but and if you saw his spoons, they wouldn't take them, right? But he interpreted his experience. So we've established that your brain creates experiences, and if you dream and if you have hallucinations, in fact, you wouldn't know if you're having hallucinations, because everybody who has an hallucination believes that it's accurate. They don't think it's an hallucination, right? You could see, and I have spoken to people who are absolutely convinced they were visited by aliens. Absolutely convinced, because it was real to them, right? That's an hallucination. Okay, so your brain is not a passive receiver. It creates experiences, dreams, hallucinations, etc. But a big function of your brain is to recognize change. So what happens, this is actually how it works. Your brain predicts what's going to happen next. And if what happens next is what it predicted, your brain really gives it no attention whatsoever. So if you recall, when you were learning to ride a bicycle, you put a lot of effort into that. It's really hard. I remember it was really hard to stay upright. And if you're learning to drive, it's really hard to start. But as soon as you get the hang of it, you don't even give it a moment's thought. You could have a conversation with someone else, you give it no thought whatsoever. As soon as something jumps out in front of you, bang, your foot is on the brake before you've even realized it. Your brain is taking care of what happens. And I'll tell you an interesting experience of that. The other day, I was cooking an egg and I dropped the egg and I was wearing my slippers and I caught the egg. I caught the egg on there, on my slippers. I just put my foot out and caught the egg and it didn't break. I thought, fantastic. What a brilliant example of your brain taking care of it all, right? Really, the consciousness that you think of as you is kind of just along for the ride. Your brain takes care of everything. Now, we established last night that I said to you, like, why are you still anxious? And we came to the conclusion that your brain expects you to be anxious and therefore you are anxious. It is predicting that you're going to be anxious because that's what happens. That has been your experience for quite a long time, and therefore it gives you that experience. And really nothing changes. You're anxious, okay, fine. Doesn't need to do anything. So how can we trick our brain into stop giving us anxiety? Remember the two realities: external reality, internal reality. Now, you do not have, in principle, right? You do not have a psychological problem in external reality. External reality is not a problem to you. Like everybody else, you manage to do things, you solve problems, right? You have no problem in external reality. All psychological problems are a consequence of internal reality. Now, in your brain, you have what we might call an inner working model of the world, and that inner working model predicts what's going to happen. That inner working model gives you anxiety. So what we have to do is we have to change that inner working model. Now, I was talking to someone this morning, a lovely person, and she said, anxiety keeps me safe. Now, if you believe that anxiety is useful, if you believe that worry is useful, but if you believe that anxiety is useful, what problem is that going to give you? Any idea? If anxiety keeps you safe, hi Malcolm, if you believe that anxiety keeps you safe, or that anxiety is useful, or that catastrophizing is useful, or that worry is useful, or that worry is essential, if you believe any of these things, what problem is that going to cause for you? Let's have a comment or two. Come on, throw in. Let's make it a little bit more interactive. Anxiety keeps me safe. What problem is that going to cause for you? Worry is useful. Catastrophizing is useful because it means that I can cover all the bases, right? I'm never surprised. Worrying is good. I'm always looking out for the worst possible scenario. Now, when it doesn't happen, I feel good, right? What problems is that going to cause for you? Gillian's got it. It makes anxiety seem important. But look, if we are saying your brain predicts reality, and as long as that prediction is accurate, your brain doesn't do anything, right? No incentive for change. Anxiety fuels more anxiety. Absolutely. Hi, Deirdre. You're right. Just to reiterate this, your brain predicts the future. If the future is as your brain predicts it, nothing has to change, and therefore your brain gives no attention to it. If you believe anxiety is useful, then your brain, by giving you anxiety, is doing exactly what you want it to do. Nothing changes. Yeah, right, Colette. And if you think of it like that, the kind of solution is also a bit built into what we just said, right? Anxiety keeps me safe. Okay, if you believe that, nothing can change. You will not voluntarily put yourself in an unsafe situation. So what we have to do is we've got to somehow trick your brain into realizing that anxiety does not keep you safe. We have to trick your brain into realizing that the experience of anxiety it is giving you is not accurate. The trouble is you believe it is. You believe that you are under threat. You believe that you have to worry. You believe that you have to catastrophize. You do not see an alternative. Hi, Alison. You do not see an alternative to being anxious. And therefore, your brain is always giving you what you expect to have, which is anxiety, right? So nothing can change. And yet, when I work with people in my clinic, routinely, I would see people with anxiety and depression, and I would expect them to, let's say, be cured of anxiety and depression. And I'm going to say an average of 10 sessions. So it's between 8 and 12 a lot of times, right? I'm going to say an average of 10 sessions. I would expect someone who comes in with severe anxiety, moderate, even severe depression, after 10 sessions, more or less, I would expect them to be cured. How can we do that, right? What is the mechanism by which that happens? Well, if we think of it like this, if someone says to me, I am anxious, I will say, okay, what is making you anxious? And they'll say, typically they'll say, I'm not really sure, right? But it always ends up being a misinterpretation of what's actually going on, or a personalization in some way of something which has happened, okay? And typically an example would be taking the blame for something, for instance, or feeling guilty about something that actually wasn't your fault, So these would be very classic kind of, hi Tim, these would be very classic kind of experiences. Now, your brain makes you anxious, it gives you anxiety. You do not see that your brain is giving you anxiety, and therefore you organize your life around avoiding the things that you're frightened of, and avoiding the feelings of anxiety. If you're an anxiety wizard, my self-help CBT course, you'll have gone through the 5 doors. You'll have looked at the 5 doors videos, and you'll see that you're avoiding stuff. You're trying to stay safe using safety behaviors. You're doing all sorts of things to manage the problem in that bit of you that is consciousness, but you're not reprogramming your brain. You're not doing anything actually useful. You're just keeping yourself imprisoned. The trouble is, well, no one's locked the door, right? You're keeping yourself imprisoned, but the door's not locked. You can come out anytime you choose to come out. But to come out, we have to do something very important. And it's absolutely critical. And this is, in a sense, the role of therapy. And this is the role of self-help CBT. And it's really everything that I do, right? You have to recognize that your experience of anxiety, what your brain gives you, is not a legitimate experience. What I mean by that is, you have to be able to say, my anxiety is a problem, and I recognize that it's simply kind of a program that my brain is running, and I have decided to stop running that program. So in a sense, we have to trick your brain, or we have to do this trick. We have to tell your brain that the experience it is giving you is invalid. It's not accurate. It's not congruent. It's not what we want. We have to tell your brain that its inner working model of the world that gives you anxiety is inaccurate. Now, your brain is only interested in discrepancies, differences between what it thinks is going to happen and what happens. Right now, if you're anxious, right? It gives you anxiety, you go, yeah, I'm anxious. You might say, well, I don't want to be anxious, but actually you don't do anything about it. You don't challenge it. You just go, oh, I wish I wasn't anxious. And I sometimes go on forums and I see people, oh, hi, Tim, Chris, Melissa. I see people on some of these forums, particularly American ones, and they're always going on about anti-anxiety drugs. I've just started metazapine. What do you think about that? I can't sleep because I'm on clozapam. I'm on this, that, and the other. Oh, I've been on benzodiazepine. None of it's relevant. It's just tinkering around the edges. It's not. It's just, well, in fairness, it is their experience, but it's not at all relevant if you want to get rid of anxiety, because anxiety is internally generated, inappropriately internally generated, and to stop it, we have to tell your brain that anxiety is inappropriate. Now, I know it's complicated, and you might not have heard this before, because this is the more complex end of thinking about anxiety. And we don't normally talk about this way of doing things in CBT. We just basically cut to the chase. But because you're not in CBT with me, I'm trying to help you to understand. That's the whole basis of self-help CBT. You understand the process. So we have to work to help your brain to recognize that your anxiety is invalid, that your anxiety experience is an invalid experience. It is not accurate. It does not accurately conform to the world in which you live. And I say this all the time. I do this all the time, right? But I'm going to do it again because I do it all the time. Do you feel anxious? Let's say yes. Okay. I say, well, look around. Do you have a threat? And you would have to say no. So why are you anxious? If you don't have a threat, why would you feel anxious? Well, the answer would be because you're anxious. You're always anxious. You expect to be anxious. Anxiety is the experience that you have trained your brain to give you. Therefore, you feel anxious. But in fact, you don't have a threat, right? Therefore, anxiety is always an overestimation of threat. Now, if you accept that anxiety is an overestimation of threat, that tells you that your anxiety is not accurate. That makes sense to you, I hope. Because if your anxiety is not accurate, hi Alison, then it gives you the start of the process by which you can tell your brain that your anxiety is invalid. And that, I kind of summarize that, I turn it into a little homework that I give to people. And it's basically, the homework is that I get people to say, I am safer than I feel I am. Because when you believe that you are safer than you feel, you're setting up a conflict between what's true in external reality and how you feel. Now, your brain is pretty much, it wants to be calibrated to external reality, but you've got to create enough of a conflict for it to put some attention onto the process and recognize that, in fact, its prediction of what's going to happen, i.e. anxiety, is inaccurate, right? So therefore we say, I am safer than I feel I am. I am safer than I feel I am. We have these two realities. In external reality, I'm safe. In internal reality, I don't feel safe. Therefore, I am safer than I feel I am. This is the beginning. It's a simple, but I have to say profound beginning to telling your brain that the experience of anxiety is not a valid experience. Anxiety is a fantasy. Now, I know it feels real. And as far as your body is concerned, it is real. Because your anxiety is a physical manifestation of threat. But look around. Where is the threat? There isn't one. So your body is manifesting the habit of internal threat that your inner working model creates. So if you want to get started on this, I would suggest to you that you can simply use the mantra, I am safer than I feel I am. Everyone who's familiar with my work will know this. And it's the beginning, but it's just like one step. And there are 100 steps that we need to take, because your brain's inner working model is not easily modified or rejected, okay? Because it's been built up over many years, and you have the force of habit. And therefore, we have to come at it from 100 different directions. And that's why you need to do, in a sense, the course, the CBT course, right? A session of CBT with me saying this to you is not sufficient. It opens you up to the idea that you can actually eradicate anxiety. That's not really going to be a problem. But you have to go about it the right way. And if you don't go about it the right way, well, nothing will change, right? It will just perpetuate. So an anti-anxiety medication, that won't change anxiety. It might make you feel a bit better, right? but you have to stay on it forever, otherwise it'll just come back. And many forms of counseling, I have to say, may or may not be helpful depending on how they're oriented. But a course of CBT that treats anxiety is very helpful, and typically anxiety doesn't come back once it's been rectified, because your brain's inner working model has changed, and it no longer therefore gives you anxiety because it's not relevant, and it will continue not to give you anxiety because it's not relevant, right? So I don't want to kind of wobble on too much. Suffice it to say that if you start with this simple homework, and you'll start to feel less anxious over a period of a week to 2 weeks, right? You say, I am safer than I feel I am. And you say it under your breath, like this. I'm safer than I feel. You move your mouth, you hear it, and you think it. You do 10 repetitions in a set, like this. 10 repetitions in a set. And you do 20 sets a day, spread out throughout the day. And it's called a metacognitive tool, which basically means you're commenting on the process that your brain gives you. And by doing so, you're not buying into the anxiety, you're making your brain pay attention a little bit more to this process. Now, I invented this. It's a brilliant little thing, and it always works. If you do this over a period of a week to 2 weeks, your anxiety, your sense of feeling unsafe, your sense of threat will diminish. It won't take you all the way, because that would be a big ask, but it will take you some distance. And if you can recognize that your anxiety is reduced, then you know that the self-help CBT tools are useful to you. If you want to learn more, if you want to get on the journey out of anxiety, eradicate anxiety, entirely doable, get into Anxiety Wizard self-help CBT program. It's free to start. The first week's free, so you can at least do the worry tools and the anxiety tools. It's right on my website, drpurvis.online. Just join the Anxiety Wizard program, and it's free for the first week. Thereafter, it's less than a pack of cigarettes a week. Less than a pack of cigarettes a week, and it will take you all the way out of anxiety. So, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, please leave the questions. And if I get enough questions and it seems like we need more clarification, I might do another Facebook Live tomorrow night, but I'm not intending to do one, but I may if it's necessary, so that we can get more clarification. Okay, so I'm going to say good night. Thank you for joining me, and we'll talk again at another time.